Hi guys, welcome back. So, happy hump day. I actually wanted to do this video yesterday, but I did put it off till today because yesterday I felt drained. I was doing psych evals like yesterday and I had meetings and I just felt mentally drained, so I figured I'll wait to do it today. So I'm glad that I have time to do it today. I'm working from home, remotely from home. And today is like my therapy day, so I see clients remotely for therapy. And it's pretty like laid back. And I'm on my lunch break, so I figured, come to you guys and do it right now. But this is something that has come across my mind. And you guys know that I do follow several Black conscious leaders in the conscious community, as we call it. And I'm going to get into talking about the three that I follow. I follow several, but I'm going to talk about three that kind of stick out to me and I think are making and have made an impactful difference in the Black community. So we will get into that. Hopefully my phone doesn't die. How are you guys doing, by the way? I kind of like this working from home thing because I get to be so comfortable. Sit in my chair and see clients remotely. It's really cool. I don't have to leave the house. Save time from traveling and, get to stay home. And you guys, especially knowing that the temperature has dropped, so a little bit colder outside. I'm in New York City, so of course it's like, what, in the 40s, I think? So I be feeling good in my warm house, my warm domain. It's just, it's great not having to leave. But I do go into the office like one day out of the week. So I do in-person evals one day out of the week at the office. But let's get into this. So the three leaders that I am going to talk about, and I call them leaders because they do have a significant following. Significant enough that I would say, two of them actually have a following of like hundreds of thousands of followers, right? The other one, his following is relatively significant, but he doesn't have that many followers. He doesn't have like hundreds and thousands of followers, but he has a consistent base. He has a consistent following to the point where, you can tell that it's making an impact in the Black community. People know who he is. So, the first one I'm going to mention, Dr. Umar Johnson. It's a dead giveaway. It's like no surprise, right? You guys know I've been following Dr. Umar Johnson for several years now. I would say maybe, 5 years? 4 or 5 years. The length of time that I was living in LA working on my PhD, I was following him. And I think I first discovered him back in, 2014? When I first met my ex, he actually introduced me to him virtually. It wasn't in person. Never met Dr. Umar Johnson in person, face to face, but I would like to meet him face to face. So, he's the one that I'm going to talk about here in this video. The other one is Dr. Polight. Might as well call him a doctor. He needs an honorary doctorate, but his name is Brother Polight. He's from New York. I think he's from Brooklyn. And then the last person I'm going to talk about is Eligio Bishop. He calls himself Babaji now. He's gotten so many different names. So goes from Eligio Bishop, which is his government name, to I think Nature Boy, because he lived out in nature for some time. He went from Nature Boy to like Immortal Chief, and now he calls himself Babaji. But I'm going to refer to him as Eligio Bishop in this video. And I think he is from Harlem, New York. So all of these are Black men. I'll call them conscious leaders because they do have a degree of consciousness and awareness of what's happening as far as the Black population in the context of white supremacy. So I like that, number one, they're all Black. They're all beautiful men. And that they have an awareness, right? They know what's going on. They are able to conceptualize what the problem is accurately and they have went publicly about it, because some people, we know what's going on, but some of us don't have the courage to talk about this openly in public in front of anyone and everyone, right? Including white people, including the so-called oppressors, right? So I like that these men have the courage to step out to unashamedly, unapologetically state what these problems are, right? And I think that this is what they all have in common, is that they all have identified what the problem is. They all recognize white supremacy, right? I think they have specific different focuses that they kind of like tune into, right? So we all know that Dr. Umar Johnson, he's more focused on like special education, the war against black boys, as he calls it, and he wants to interrupt the school to prison pipeline. That's the whole point of him building a school. The FDMG is an African-centered school that he wants to build. He's in the process of building now, actually, in Wilmington, Delaware. And it's been some time that he's been working on building this school, but we're getting there. Like, we're getting there. So I have much respect for him, despite what naysayers have to say. Of course, you're going to get people who are going to be critics and want to critique every little thing that he does and how he does it. And sometimes that's helpful, to have people kind of in the corner on the sidelines saying, all right, well, maybe you should do it this way, or he did this wrong, because it kind of provides some insight. Some of it, like I say, to a certain degree can be helpful, and then some of it's just extra noise. It's just distractions. It's just in the background, right? And it's just like, it's not really helping move the thing along, and in fact, it's actually sometimes they're trying to like tear it down, right? They're trying to interrupt what he is doing for the black community. But I mean, when a person is set out on a mission to achieve something, no matter what other people have to say, if it's meant by the universe to take form and to exist, then that's what's going to happen. So nothing can interrupt that. Nothing can get in the way. Nothing can destroy the mission that Dr. Umar Johnson is on. And I think that's just going to make it that much more relevant and more important. When the school actually opens up and it's an operation, like, it's just going to be a big thing. It's going to be big because for so many years the school has been attacked, and it's been in people's mouths, people who support him, but a lot of naysayers, because like the naysayers are the ones who get the most attention. Had I made this video bashing the FDMG Academy and saying Dr. Umar Johnson was a scam and the views would be up, right? But because, I'm making this video in support of these three men, people don't really care to hear positive information, but that's just what I have to bring. So I am coming at that angle, and given that Dr. Umar Johnson, his specific focus is, on education, I like that, but he's also coming at it from a political angle. And I think that's why he received so much backlash, because he is into politics. He said he was a poli-sci major in school, but, the fact that he wants his school to be African-centered. So it's not just a school, right, just teaching different subjects, but he basically wants to revolutionize the minds of these young black boys and black girls, so that basically a couple decades from now, you're going to see a different generation, different society of black people, period. I mean, you look at how black people are now, and yes, there's a percentage of us who have awakened, right, who are conscious, but that's like a very small percentage, and I was kind of, I guess, oblivious to the fact that not most black people think like that. I'm like, okay, well, aren't most black people conscious? I think I mentioned this in one of my videos, and somebody said no. Most black people are not conscious. Unfortunately, most black people just don't have a clue, and it manifests itself in many different ways. So you will see how most black people are in times like, let's say now, right, where they're voting, and electing a new president, and it's just like a lot of black people think that that's really going to bring about change. But people who are truly conscious and live by this, it's one thing to know the the truth. It's another thing to actually live it. And so that's, I think, where the confusion comes in, because it's like there are different shades. And I mean, when I say shades, I'm not talking about like physical shades, but I'm talking about in terms of our level of consciousness, right? Our level of political awareness and intelligence. There are just many different flavors of black people, and some just don't quite get it. And I think it might be a waste of time trying to make people understand, right? It's like either that consciousness has awakened you, like it has touched you in a certain way. Like, it's not meant for everybody, I think. That's just what it is. And so that's where you kind of have like the disagreements and people kind of going back and forth. I'm not interested in that. I'm not interested in debating. Like, I know what I know. Other people may agree, disagree, whatever, right? But I think, like I said, I think that's where some of the controversy comes, is that, you know, he is a political person and he speaks with conviction, you know, and I like that the way he speaks. He's like, he doesn't care. He's not looking for approval, right? And that's why I really support him. So going over to Brother Polight. Now, Brother Polight has been in the conscious circle for many, many years. I don't know who came first. I would probably say they both evolved at the same. They probably both came about at the same time. Dr. Umar Johnson and Brother Polight. Brother Polight is well aware of what's going on. But I think the difference, because this is just what I observed, and this video is just about my perspective, obviously, right? Everybody's entitled to their own observations. But what I have observed is that Brother Polight, he's aware, he's connected, he knows what's going on, but I think that his motivation has changed. Like, he's not as motivated to do something about what's happening, right? And like, it's almost like his intent has changed. It's like, given his social status clearly has changed. Anybody who knows Brother Polight has been following him, or even sees, you know, him from time to time on social media, is like, you will see that his financial situation has changed. Like, he's no longer a struggling black man, so to speak, or living in the hood. He's completely moved out of the hood. He lives, I believe, in Los Angeles, California, on the West Coast. Has a nice house. You know, he's making millions of dollars. He's associated with the elite club, you know. He knows Floyd Mayweather. Like, I think he's friends with Floyd Mayweather. He's friends with a lot of like elite people, millionaires, right? And so that obviously has changed his position. And I think the issue with that is that he's disconnected in a way. You know, it's like, he's a leader because he has people who follow him, people who are looking up to him for answers, right, and direction as far as what to do and where to go, and the context of what's happening, what's impacting black people on a day-to-day basis, right? People look up to him. And he's disconnected because that's no longer his reality. It's like, he knows cognitively that these are problems that impact black people. But I think because his social situation has changed, his status has changed, where he lives has changed, like, it's going to change, I think, your perspective. A lot of black people say, oh, I'm never going to change, no matter how much money I make, no matter how much status I get or what tax bracket I end up in. A lot of black people make the claim that, oh, they're always going to stay the same, they're not going to change. But I just think it's hard, though. I think that our identity does change based on our bank account. You know, based on the size of our bank account, and his bank account has changed drastically, and so his perspective in relation to how he conceptualizes the problems that impact the black community, it's inevitable. It has changed, you know, and he is hyper-focused on the money aspect, and I find it to be quite interesting. Nothing wrong with money, by the way, right? Like, I don't have a problem with capitalism. I think that it serves a purpose. But, you know, he's really hyper focused on, like, you know, making money, and he teaches these classes. I don't know much about the classes, but I know, generally speaking, like, he teaches classes when people pay a certain amount of money and they join a class and they learn about money and how to make money, you know. Great. And I think that's a major part in terms of the elevation of the Black community. Like, you know, obviously we are lacking financial resources, right? Access to capital, and that's important when it comes to our success and this within the context of America, right? And so that leads me to my point. This is a very significant point that I want to make in differentiating these three leaders, because we have Dr. Umar Johnson, who recognizes the problem of white supremacy. So does Brother Polight within the context of white supremacy, right? And the issues that we face, you know, like the inequalities. We can go down the list of problems that impact the Black community. But the similarities that I've noticed between Dr. Umar Johnson and Brother Polight is that they see the answer as that it can be solved by staying in America, right? So they're willing to work within the context of America, living in this American society. Whereas Eligio Bishop, aka Nature Boy, aka Baba G, he's completely opposed to existing within the American system, which he calls Babylon. So that's a very notable difference, because that kind of taps into the solution aspect, right? We all know the problems that impact the Black community, but what about solutions? So when we look at these three different leaders and how they go about solving these problems, Dr. Umar Johnson, although he's completely against integration, he's still open to working within America, right? Like staying in America, living in America. He's not telling Black people to leave America. In fact, he's saying, okay, we can exist here, but we're going to build our own kind of society within a society. And that's the thing that I grapple with. Like, I kind of struggle with understanding that, because he's like, all right, you know, we're not going to depend on white people for nothing, right? And he talks about his solution, which is the FDMG Academy. That's just part of it. I mean, aside from that, like, he wants to kind of build like a community, like a Black Wall Street, right? Where we have our own banking system, our own fire department, police department, grocery stores, our own everything, right? Like our own little utopian society within America. And it sounds great, and it sounds ideal. But what I struggle with is like, okay, how? Because on one hand, all right, it sounds idealistic, but on the other hand, it's like you're still living in America, and then you're still using American resources. Like, it's just hard for me to wrap my mind around it, because I'm like, okay, you have an iPhone, you still use American technology, but you want to say we aren't going to do things completely African-centered. You guys help me understand this, because this is just what I struggle with. It's just like, okay, you're saying everything African, right? He only wants African students, and African meaning like, you know, African descendant, African born, African descendant. We are descendants of Africans as African Americans. So he's saying like only African students at his school, African teachers, like African everything, no white people, right? He doesn't want to receive any funding from white people at all. But I'm like, to a certain extent, like we all are dependent on the American system. To a certain extent, we all are dependent on some kind of resource that comes from white people, that are made by the hands of white people. You know, whether it's our technology, electricity, our clothing, our food. So maybe I think, his goal could be met, could be tangible, but then it's kind of hard to concept. It's like, I think he's so futuristic. That's what it is. It's like his goal is so far out in the future, and it sounds good in theory, but to put it actually into practice, like I feel like it's gonna take time. Like we have to develop the infrastructure and the resources to even get to the point where we're completely independent from the system, and we're completely independent from all things that are not black. That's gonna take some time. Right, and alongside Dr. Umar Johnson, of course, Brother Polight, he's perfectly okay with living in America, working within the system of America to solve black people's problems, right? He's not saying, okay, we need to go to live in another country, to live in Africa. Like, he was like, no, we're going to do what we need to do right here in America. And also on top of that, play by their rules, right? So get as much money as you can. That's kind of within the system of white supremacy and consistent with the ideology of American culture, right? Capitalism, like that. That's like, he's like a splitting reflection of that. He's just black, right? Like he's really, into making a lot of money. So that's his ideology, whereas Eligio Bishop is completely opposed to that. Like he's, his motivation, his goal in terms of solving the problem that impacts the black community is all about leaving America, getting out of the Babylonian system, which he refers to, is America, right? Get out of it, America. Leave. We cannot thrive here. We need to go into nature. And I like that perspective because it makes just a lot of sense, right? In terms of like the geographical benefits of living in the tropics, having more access to the sun, getting away from the poison of this system of America when we think about like chemtrails and all the toxins that are in the air and the water, and just going away to an environment. Because environment is important, right? But that's only one aspect. So he's, in his mind, in his kind of theology, in his belief system, he wants us to abandon his system, right? And get away from the environment. He believes the environment is what has corrupted our minds, right? And the environment not just being like our physical environment, right? Our contextual environment in terms of in terms of where we live geographically. He's talking about the system. The system is our environment too, and that shapes our minds, and he's been out. The interesting thing is that he's been out in nature, so he's put his beliefs into practice. When we talk about black people having a sense of consciousness and knowing what to do, but who's actually living it, right? And Dr. Umar Johnson, he's working there. He's trying to get there in terms of opening the FDMG Academy. Brother Polight, I guess you can say he's living the solution. And obviously Eligio Bishop is living it. And given that he's put, his belief into practice as far as going out into nature, it's interesting to see the end result of that, right? Because it's not perfect, right? So you still see some of the problems coming out, as he calls it, debilitations. You still see basically these generational curses kind of playing themselves out, even though he's not in America. He's not within the confines of the system. He's far away in a different country, in an undisclosed country, because he doesn't want anyone to know, because he's had a whole freaking slew of issues that have come about with people knowing the country where he's living, and they're reporting him. That's a whole nother video. I don't really have time to go into how people have kind of developed these smear campaigns against our black leaders, but that's a whole nother video that, it's going to take some time to really get into that. But he doesn't want people to know where he lives. And given that, he's put this into practice, there's still issues, because a person can change. You can change your environment, but then your mind, your mind is still messed up, right? Because we're talking about years and years and years of programming of the mind that needs to be reversed. And it's going to take generations to do that. So I just wanted to point out those differences. Now, Another stark difference that I've noticed is their perception of women, like how they look at women, how they relate to women. Now, Brother Polight looks at the black woman as God, and I kind of like that idea. And I do have to kind of wrap this video up because I'm noticing that my battery is like at 11%. But he looks at the black woman as God. I'm just like, I like that. And he kind of worships a black woman in that respect. And he has multiple wives. I think he has like 4 wives, right? And I don't really see that he has any issues with black women. I think it's like because he like reverences a black woman as God, he doesn't have any issues, like woman issues, right? Now, Dr. Umar, he says he has respect for the black woman. Because saying and doing is 2 different things, right? So, you know, out of his mouth, he speaks positively towards black women. Refers to black women as queens. And I'm just stating the obvious, right? This is just the obvious, you know. However, he's not married. And he's in his, I think, mid to late 40s now. Dr. Umar Johnson is not married. He does have children by 2 different women, but he's not married. And I find that to be quite interesting. And then Eligio Bishop has 4 children, I think, by 4 different women. I think he said he got 4 different baby mamas. He has 3 sons and a little baby girl. And the way he looks at black women is that black women like are snakes. He's like, black women are like thorns to black men. And not only thorns, it's like he looks at black women as agents. And I think he's really speaking from his own personal experience because he's been through a lot. And from his experience, like black women who he's, as he says, he's planted his seed in these black women. They basically have taken the seed, which he, you know, his child, and use it against him. And so it's like black women have been a thorn in his side. And it's kind of hard, I think, to develop healthy relationships, let's say, with new black women in his life, when you have black women who have been a burden to you, have been a pain to you, who have been everything but a good representation of what a black woman should be. And that's really unfortunate. It's just sad because it's like that becomes like your reference point. That becomes like your template for how you conceptualize women and then how you interact with black women. And so he hasn't really had any successful relationships with black women. So I just find that comparison between those 3 men and how they look at black women and how they conceptualize like the problems impacting the black community and how they choose to deal with them and respond to them. It just fascinates me, and I wanted to make this video about that. And I want you guys to share your perspective on this topic and what I've shared so far. I do have to end this video, but it interests me. And I have much respect for all 3 of those black men. Of course, there are other leaders, but I do follow those 3 very closely. I think just because of their ideologies and just, you know, their belief system. And I like that. That's another similarity too that I noticed. Like, none of them subscribe to the whole Christianity and, well, I guess Eligio Bishop, he does, but in his own way. Like, he definitely recognizes that, you know, Jesus is black, and, you know, he's all about melanin, promoting melanin, and you know, the black race as the original people that were here before any other group of people. So I do like that, but I think he does have some of his teachings kind of come from the Bible. But outside of that, like Dr. Umar Johnson and Brother Polight, they don't subscribe to Christianity, to like traditional religion. So I do like that about them. I respect that because I no longer do that. And I've been like kind of pulled myself away from religion. And that's a part of being woke. Like, I think we need to really have like an in-depth discussion about what does it mean to be woke, because it's like some black people is like, there are levels to wokeness, so to speak, right? So, you know, I think the majority of us, and this is what I think I was referring to when I said I thought most black people were woke, is that I think the majority of us, like, we recognize, like, okay, police brutality, right? We recognize racial inequalities and, you know, the barriers to access, discrimination that impact the black community. Most of us have experienced that. Most, I won't say all, because some of us are just completely aloof and we're like, oh, I never experienced racism. I don't see any barriers. I don't think that white people are racist. So that's a small percentage, but I would say most of us can agree on what problems impact the African American community. But I think where the differences come in is like religion, our perspectives, our beliefs when it comes to religion. That's what separates us. It's the religious things. And then, of course, politics. You see that now played out on social media where you got black people are like, oh, go vote. You need to vote. That's going to make a huge difference. And you got some black people like, why is voting done for black people? Well, we still fucked up. On that note, I will end this video here. I want you guys to share your thoughts and any questions you may have in the comment section below. Feel free to share this video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. And you guys see my artwork I did in the background. I'm very proud of it. It's like my pride and joy. But I'll catch you guys later. Love you guys. Bye.